So the next close-up of this map shows central England and the border between England and Scotland. So it also includes one of the historical defense lines, and I mean Hadrian's Wall. This was a wall of fortifications and earthworks with military encampments ordered by the Romans to protect the Roman occupied lands from the attacks of the people living beyond the wall, that is in Scotland, mostly the Picts and other tribes. This is of course in the north of England, above the main city here, Newcastle upon Tyne. I don't think it's on the map. We'll eventually talk about it later on, so it's just to indicate it's there. The political border between England and Scotland is on the map. It's a kind of a small dotted line between the cities of Carlisle in the west and Berwick upon Tweed in the east. So this is the political line between the formerly separate kingdoms of Scotland and England. Of course, for many centuries now they have been united. Will they survive Brexit? I don't know, we'll see. So what else we can see in this close-up? This is the central part of England with a lot of industrial cities like Liverpool, Manchester, Sheffield, Leeds. So all the areas that were very active during the Industrial Revolution and in the 19th century, with the heavy industry, with the mining industry. You'll see another map later on with that. What else do we have here? We have a historical city of York. And this is something which is quite important historically. This is the capital of a very big and important county of Yorkshire, which is further subdivided. We'll talk about that, don't worry. We have also a smaller city. It's in smaller letters, but I would say historically is as important and it is also in central England, and this is the city of Lancaster. So if you remember from history the Wars of the Roses between two aristocratic families, the Yorks and the Lancasters, so here we have their ancestral seats in York and in Lancaster. As you can see, they're not very far away, so yeah, this is something quite important as well. We have the Lake District here with Scafell, Pikes, the high peak there. You can see some lakes as well. You can also see the Isle of Man here in this close-up. So there we go, and the Scottish Lowlands. So the flatter lower zone before the uplands, so this line of hills, and you can just make out the city of Glasgow here on this map. So we move to Scotland now, so the close-up on Scotland. You can see a larger part of the Scottish Isles with the Orkneys. The Shetlands, as I said, are further to the north, and you can see the Hebrides better with the outer and inner Hebrides. You can see the location of the main cities in Scotland, so the regional capital of Edinburgh. Glasgow is actually a larger city, but it's like Warsaw and Krakow. Edinburgh is an old historical city with the royal castle and beautiful historical old town. Glasgow is more modern. It grew in the 19th century because of the industry. There are many more important places in Scotland, and we are going to talk about Scotland at much greater detail. But two more cities for you to remember, both on the eastern coast, Dundee and Aberdeen. So basically 4 major cities of Scotland. One of the interesting things that links all 4 of them is that they had separate independent universities before London. So the moment when England only had Oxford and Cambridge, the old medieval universities built up of colleges, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Dundee and Aberdeen had 4 modern universities based on a European model. They had a very long tradition, for example, for medical training. So still in the 19th century, in literature, for example, we encounter the idea of a Scottish doctor. So Dr. Jekyll was one such Scottish doctor. So you can see Grampian Mountains, you can see some lochs. Lochs meaning lakes in Scottish Gaelic. You can see that they are quite long and narrow, which is typical for mountainous areas, for mountain lakes. Some of them are kind of connected to the estuaries of the rivers, like fjords really. There is a term, firth, and for example you can see, I hope, Firth of Clyde near Glasgow, and some more, for example Moray Firth and Firth of Lorne. The word firth means a special kind of bay, which is a kind of long and narrow river estuary. So it's like a fjord in Norway. They are perhaps less spectacular, but also very beautiful and similar in geographic or geologic terms. Some of the famous lochs, of course, Loch Ness, famous for the reputed monster. Loch Lomond, which is famous for a patriotic song about Scottish soldiers being imprisoned in England, and they dream about their homeland. They want to go back to the bonny banks of Loch Lomond. So this is one of the lochs here. And the deepest of these lochs is called Loch Morar. So as you can see, this is quite a rugged terrain with the highest mountains in the United Kingdom, with a lot of small islands, with a lot of wildlife and beautiful nature as well. We are going to talk about Scotland at some greater point. It's just to indicate. The next close-up is Northern Ireland. So what we have here, something that you can quite easily see, is the largest lake in the United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, called Lough Neagh. If you look closer, there are some more lakes, and they are called lough. So the Scottish Gaelic is loch, the Irish Gaelic is lough. Apparently it's pronounced this way. I asked some Irish people. So Lough Neagh is the largest lake in the United Kingdom. The regional capital city is Belfast. some more important cities. Probably the next important the next important city is called Londonderry. Sometimes you can find the name of the city pronounced or just called Derry without the London part, especially by the Unionists. So the people who would like Northern Ireland to be united with the rest of the Irish Republic. And this is a good moment to tell you about one more name, the geographical name of Northern Ireland. Sometimes you can find the term Ulster. Ulster is one of the medieval or early medieval kingdoms that existed in Ireland. And this was the kingdom in the north, the kingdom of Ulster. It includes 9 counties, but only 6 of these counties are now Northern Ireland. The remaining 3 counties are, for example, this piece of land west of Londonderry. This used to be part of the historical Ulster, but it is not part of Northern Ireland, so not part of the United Kingdom. So you may also find some Irish patriots refusing to use the term Ulster and talking in its place about the 6 counties. The 6 counties, it means this part of Ulster which is part of the United Kingdom. So here we have this big map. I strongly encourage you to look at it for a longer time at your leisure, to see all the names and the locations of the places that we are going to discuss. If you feel overwhelmed at this point, don't get too frightened. We are going to recycle this knowledge over and over again in different ways. Some more things. Let's talk, for example, about the climate of Great Britain. So this is the marine climate. So it's influenced by the sea, which means that it's relatively mild, without very large differences in temperatures throughout the year, and also the differences in rainfall or snowfall. This is very good for all kinds of economic activities, for growing crops, for farming, sheep farming especially. This is why if you go to Britain, it's very green. This is really what makes this island so green, and what makes the gardens so beautiful. There is a lot of moisture. The rivers very rarely freeze. There is very rarely strong frost in winter. Snow happens, especially in the north, of course, predictably. The north and west, so the mountainous areas, the areas more exposed to the Atlantic Ocean, have a slightly harsher climate than the parts situated on the east and south. But generally, compared with the continental climate in much of continental Europe, like Poland, the climate in Britain is milder. Here I have a funny little image of Scottish seasons. I think this was, I first seen it years ago when I was first in Scotland as a student. This was a postcard. I'm not sure this is the very postcard or some artistic version of it, but here you have the Scottish seasons, and there is a sheep, a very spectacular, sheep, Scottish sheep wearing the shoes and standing in the rain. for spring, summer, autumn, and in the winter it has a little scarf, because that's your summer in Scotland. Quite a lot of rain, and well, throughout the year. It's rainy, it's windy, but it's very beautiful. So, yeah. What else do we have? There is a map here that we are going to encounter also. The political division into counties. So we are going to talk about all these counties one by one, and I hope this will take us a few weeks. So this is just to familiarize you with some main parts. Yeah, just look at it. We are going to see it in much greater detail. And two more maps showing the natural resources. So the first one is a map I found of British coal fields in the 19th century. And as you can see, these are the areas that were mined for coal. So some places in Scotland, especially around the area of Glasgow. This is why Glasgow grew so much in the 19th century. We have quite a lot of coal in the north of England, around Newcastle. There was a lot of mining there, and where you have the mining, you start having heavy industry, because it's just a good location. You don't have to send the coal very far away. Also, you see significant areas with coal fields in central England, so South Yorkshire, Lancashire, around Leicester, and Staffordshire, Warwickshire. We are going to talk about these counties as well. But this is the explanation why the Industrial Revolution happened in central England. Why did it happen there in those places? Because you can farm the sheep, probably most places, but the heavy industry is very reliant on the natural resources. So first of all, coal and iron ore. So here we have the coal mines, Bristol as well, and another significant area in the south of Wales. So something I already mentioned, why the south of Wales was more developed and more urbanized than the north of Wales. Here you have it. In the 19th century, 18th, 19th century, when they started exploiting those coal fields, this is where they were. This is where you would have the metal works. This is where you would have other industrial centers, and also trading centers. So the ports in this part of Wales would also grow very quickly. The last thing is the industrial mining in Roman Britain. This is something interesting. This is to show you other natural mineral resources. So we have some places with iron, we have some places with lead, we have some places with copper, we have some places with tin, and even a little bit of gold and silver, as you can see. Apparently, Britain still mines a little bit of gold and silver. You can see where you can find them. Gold is mined in Wales, and silver is mined in England. So that's what you have. Lead mining in central England, copper mining in northern Wales, and tin mining, very important for making bronze with copper and tin. Tin mining in Cornwall. This was one of the very great natural resources exploited from the the Age of Bronze, basically. That's why you have Age of Bronze, because you have the copper mixing with the tin. So you could get the copper in the north of Wales and mix it, kind of smelt it together with the tin from Cornwall, and this is how you would have the great advancements in civilization. So there we go, and find lots of materials. And just well, Wikipedia page like British Isles, for example, is very good. It gives you a lot of information on everything. So for example, demographics. So if you have not computed the number of people living in Britain, apparently in 2019 it was just below 72 million people, with the largest cities, of course London, more than 9.7 million people living in London, I mean kind of greater London area. The next largest city is Greater Manchester with 2.5 million people. Then the conurbations, so rather than individual cities, the conurbations of West Midlands, including cities as Birmingham and for example Wolverhampton, 2.4. Then we have the conurbation of West Yorkshire with the cities of Leeds and Bradford being the biggest. It's 1.7, and at number 5 of the most populated cities in the United Kingdom, we have Glasgow, the largest city in Scotland, with 1.2 million inhabitants. So almost 10 million in London, 1.2 in Glasgow. Then we have Liverpool and South Hampshire with the cities of Portsmouth and Southampton. Then we have the Tyneside conurbation with Newcastle upon Tyne and the surrounding cities. Then we have Nottingham and Sheffield. So as you can see, Belfast is not a very large city, so the regional capital of Northern Ireland, around 600,000 people, and Cardiff, the regional capital of Wales, is even smaller, 447,000 people around, more or less. So that's basically it. And I would like to think about one more question, that is, what does it all mean for Britain as a country? This location, this geographical positioning, also in terms of the neighboring countries, so kind of geopolitics. So of course Britain is an island, which is a very good defensive location. The last successful invasion was the Norman invasion, of course, in 1066. Then many tried, Napoleon tried, Adolf Hitler tried, they were not successful, although they managed to engage Britain at sea or to cause some damage through air raids, like for example the city of Coventry, which was very heavily hit by the German air raids. So the defensive qualities of being an island, which means you don't have a big standing army. You don't need a big standing army. Once the island was unified, they could use the potential and the money for other things, like building a strong fleet. That is why Britain was, for long periods of history, the strongest naval power in the world. That is why they embarked on empire building. Because they were an island, because the land was limited. They tried, of course, if you remember medieval history, they tried to conquer some lands in France, but those neighboring countries were very well developed and also strong in military terms, so it didn't really last long when France got back their areas on the continent. So if Britain wanted to have more land for their growing population, they needed colonies. So of course they had the largest empire that the world has ever seen. And they became a superpower for most of the 19th century at the heyday of the British Empire. Another example of how geography influences British culture and history is it's much easier to keep your own peculiar customs if you are an island. So driving on the other side of the road. It is easier when to enter your country you need to cross the sea rather than just cross a land border and then everything changes, you start driving on the other side. That's why these things were not unified. That's why Britain had for a very, very long time the so-called imperial system of measurements, their own peculiar weights, measures, money system which was not decimal, and all kinds of little eccentric peculiarities. So the globalization and the unification is slower when you are an island. But at peacetime, the neighborhood of well-developed and culturally interesting countries such as France and Spain and Italy could mean that you could, for example, hire artists to work for you, painters, musicians, architects, and yes, this is why we have so many wonderful monuments created by foreigners in Britain. You may want to think of some more consequences of the geographical and geopolitical location of Britain, and we'll talk about them when we have the live meeting. And next week we'll talk about the national symbols of the United Kingdom. So, thank you.